A voice at the table is a call to action to openly welcome the voice of the healed suicide attempt survivor to the suicide prevention and education tables locally, regionally, and nationally. The purpose is to have them share their lived expertise to better inform strategic planning, policy, and training options. The film spotlights 4 suicide attempt survivors as they share a small part of their journey from the darkness of suicide to the warm sunlight of living life fully. A voice at the table is ultimately about resilience and hope. If you feel the need to talk to someone after viewing the film, please call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. And now we present A Voice at the Table. Every 40 seconds in the United States, someone attempts to die by suicide. Every 15 minutes, someone dies. The Center for Disease Control tells us that approximately 38,000 people in the United States die by suicide. With those 38,000 who die by suicide, 25 attempt. Now, when you do the math, that can come up to almost 1 million people in the United States annually attempting to die by suicide. We subtract the 38,000 from, say, 1 million, which is what it comes up to, who have attempted, then we have approximately 960,000 people who attempted to die by suicide and didn't. The cost of medical care, emergency care, loss at jobs, that comes almost down to $1 million per person who dies by suicide. We need to ask why. What turned them around? We need that voice to have an informed strategic plan. We need that voice at every table because there's something that happened for them that sent them from death to searching for life.
There's a statistic, the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention says that suicide affects roughly 1 in every 10,000 people. But for suicide attempt survivors, that's more like 1 in 10. So if we decide we'd rather not hear from that high-risk population, and then we throw our hands up when somebody kills himself, does nobody see a disconnect there?
Being involved in the suicide prevention community, I think that what it lacks, if anything, is a balance, and that balance is between fact-based research and the science behind suicide prevention, the academic side of it, and the heart and the emotion and the hope that comes with lived experience. Those are the attempt survivors, those are the lost survivors, and the people who've been through it and been to the bottom.
I think it's almost ironic that most of the information we have about those who died by suicide comes from psychological autopsy studies, from interviewing, questioning those who've been close to those persons who've died, you know, loved ones, family members, colleagues, friends, so on and so forth. That is important information, but it's also a bit biased, and it's sort of secondhand information, and it's colored by the fact that the person died by suicide.
So we're talking about 7% of attempt survivors end up dying by suicide. That means also that 93% go on to live their lives. What is their story? We got to know what their story is. We got to know why they chose to live. When they got in that dark, dark moment, when they said it was all over, it's done, I am not going to live anymore, what was the reason for living after that? We got to know that. If we're in the business of instilling hope, we got to find out from them how they found hope.
You don't hear it talked about, except in terms of somebody who has died. And it seemed like a mystery to me. What about everyone who survived? Do they get locked up? Do they disappear? What happens to them? What happens to us? Why aren't we showing these stories? Why aren't we hearing these voices?
I self-published my book about my suicide attempt in July of 2012. And I was really hesitant when I put it out. I was really concerned about coming forward with a story like that, being so personal and putting so much of myself on the line. It started to really take off and sell a lot and started to draw some attention. So I logged on to the website of the paper in my area, and they had written an article about suicide prevention. And in the comments section, people were writing about the book and about me and saying how much it helped them and you need to read this book and all that. And one of the comments that stuck out to me most was this one by a grandfather. And he had written, "This book saved my grandson's life." And when I read that, I felt taken aback that, wow, I have some responsibility in this. I actually have a lot of responsibility in this. And I hope that if I'm drawing this kind of attention, that I'm sending the right message and I'm doing this the right way. Prior to this, I had very little experience in suicide prevention, other than the lived experience that goes with it. I reached out to a national organization to ask them if they could help me and just review the book, take a look at it, and make sure what I said was right and safe, and it wasn't nothing in there that would be triggering, and that I was sending the right message. And I sent them an email, told them the story, told them that about the attention that it was drawing. And I referred to myself as a suicide survivor. The email I got back was, "Craig, the term suicide survivor refers to family members who have lost someone to suicide. Attempt survivors are of a different group. And at this moment, our committee does not work on reviewing books for attempt survivors." At first, I was definitely a little embarrassed. I knew right away I should have educated myself more on the terms and how to present myself, and I understood that completely. There are lost survivors and there are attempt survivors, and there are people who've been affected by suicide in different ways. I get that. But what struck me so much and what confused me so much was that in a field that is so incredibly important, made up of so many people with so many different experiences, that should all be coming together with one common intention to do everything they can to prevent future suicides. In that field, there are different groups. And not only are there different groups, but those groups are treated differently. And in some cases, they're excluded.
In a live webinar titled Turning Strategy into Action, which was held on June 27, 2013, Dr. Jerry Reed, Executive Director of SPRC.org, commented that the view of those who are attempt survivors must be at the community table. Dr. Richard McKeon, the Director of SAMHSA's Suicide Prevention Branch, also shared, "For many years, suicide prevention has not been informed by those who have been there."
My name's Cara Anna. I edit a couple of sites. One is called talkingaboutsuicide.com, and the other is attemptsurvivors.com. That's a project for the American Association of Suicidology. I am an attempt survivor myself. My background is as a journalist. I was a foreign correspondent in China when I had a pair of attempts. After the first, I was very secretive about it, quite ashamed. And after I did everything I could to not have it happen again, I had another attempt. And I decided that one thing I could do to help myself was to take away the severe stress of feeling ashamed, keeping it secret, not talking to anyone, thinking it was somehow my fault. And so I started speaking openly, or at least being open to the people I knew, and I thought it might be helpful to find everybody else who was out about it. So I started looking for resources and websites, organizations, etc. And to my surprise, there was very, very, very little out there.
was very little. Attempt survivor support groups, virtually non-existent in the country. You know, to feel already how you feel, to be in the headspace that drives you to being suicidal is one thing, and it's really an ugly place to be. It's a difficult place to be. To take action is, I think, another place. To survive and wake from it and try to figure out what you're going to do with your life, to piece things together and try to figure out how you're going to continue on going and deal with whatever feelings you're feeling. Some people feel anger, some people feel shame, some people feel overwhelming despair that they will just never get out of the position that they're in. And to have so few resources available, I think, is a shame.
I never cease to be amazed at how liability terrified many clinicians are about working with attempt survivors.
My name is Phil Rodgers. For 10 years, I was an evaluation scientist with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And in that role, I spent most of my time collaborating with the Suicide Prevention Resource Center and managing the Best Practices Registry for Suicide Prevention. Recently, I changed positions. I'm now Vice President of Design, Development, and Evaluation for Living Works Education. And of special interest is the development of a program called Suicide to Hope, which is going to bring a recovery focus to clinicians in their work with those who've attempted suicide or been at heightened risk for suicide.
My name is Tracey Medeiros, and I am a suicide attempt survivor. I've had some strange clinicians. When I was first trying to go and get help and receive help early in my 20s, it was like their only answer was the hospital. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's not an option for me. You know, because I kept thinking to myself, like, how is that an option? You know, you're only like, it's only like a substitute. It's like, so you're prolonging it.
If you're really going to talk with someone and you're really going to open up and you're really going to allow them to help you or allow them to coach you and guide you, you need to be able to trust them. And that trust can't be faked. It has to be genuine.
Why hasn't the voice of the attempt survivor been more part of the field? That's a good question. I think the primary reason is fear. Fear of increasing risk, fear of liability, fear of not knowing how to involve suicide attempt survivors in the field.
There is a huge hesitation to, for example, create support groups, to have widespread messaging campaigns, to put attempt survivors' voices out there, to put their faces out there, to put their stories out there, because there is this high level of nervousness. Oh, we can't really talk openly about it because that might cause people to go kill themselves, which is ridiculous. It's the silence that causes people to kill themselves. It is. Because if I can't talk to anybody, if this just keeps weighing on me over and over, deeper and deeper, and I don't see anybody talking, and I don't know where to go, then yeah, that is a heavy burden to bear.
This is, I think, a shame for our profession. It's also, I think, about fear, just fear, that clinicians are scared of suicide. A, they're not prepared to deal with it. B, since they're not trained to deal with it, they think they're suckers for liability. And they're going to get sucked into some legal system that is going to strip away their ability to practice as a clinician and shame them. And you know what? It feels bad to have somebody die by suicide that you're working with.
They see us at our worst, and I think they forget to see us when we're at our best. And they need to start opening their eyes to the rest of our lives. They throw around words like recovery, but they don't show us in recovery. And I don't think they're exposed to us in recovery, when we're coping, when we're out doing things like this, when we're out running marathons and getting graduate degrees and so on, and getting married and having kids. They only see us when we come in for help, and they forget to see the rest of us.
I can almost understand that there'd be some hesitation to hear from an attempt survivor, because you're not entirely sure what their message is going to be. What are they going to say? What are they, are they angry? Are they happy to be alive? Are they angry to be alive? Are they going to tell us everything we did wrong without giving us any solutions? Are they just going to stand there and complain? Is their message really going to ring true of hope? Are they really going to exemplify that life can get better? And I can understand that, because if you're in a situation where you're hurt and you're at risk for suicide, you want to hear from the people who've been there and found their way out of it. You cling to that. I've been there, and I wanted to hear that. I wanted to find someone who can show me a way out. If I, as an attempt survivor at this point in my life, are allowed forward and allowed to speak to people who are at risk, and my message isn't right, I'm going to do a lot more harm than good.
I think the field is changing as we are hearing more and more voices of those with lived experience. I think it is going to start opening doors in the field to those who've previously been fearful of involving suicide attempt survivors in their efforts and in suicide prevention. I think as we hear those voices, strong voices coming out from across the United States, that it will lend an opening of a door to the field, to involving suicide attempt survivors and helping us to design and implement not only suicide prevention programs, but programs to serve those who've been at heightened risk.
The trainings that I have received recently on suicide education is an assist training, and I will be going forward with that to hopefully to be a trainer in assist as well. I'm also a QPR trained, so that means question, persuade, refer. I mean, I actually do this as a job, as a peer specialist, and what that is that I provide lived experience to people that have mental illness, such as myself. I work at the Silver City Teen Center as the teen coordinator. What I do is I provide support and inspiration and hope to the kids that come in.
The more people talk about their lived experience, the more people will be open to hearing their message, and the less stigma we will have, and the less fear, and the less discrimination against those who've attempted suicide.
Trauma-informed programming is resilience-based. Creativity can be an important key to healing and wellness.
I am an author, but I am an attempt survivor. That's really what my message is about. So I'm going to share with you a lot of the events of my life, the trauma that I have been through, the mental health issues that I've experienced, and my suicide attempt. But most importantly, I want to share with you what I did to move on from that part of my life. That's where I think the real value is, and that's what I think, that's the message I want to share. But it's important for me that you know the background to all of that and the things that I had to cope with and deal with and overcome to get where I am today. The more I can talk about this, the better I feel for myself. The more I realize it in my own way. I personally believe that creativity is extremely critical to balance. Not even to say wellness, just balance. What writing served for me all the way through that wasn't just being able to purge my thoughts onto paper and being able to document things and express myself and get some of that emotion that was clogging up my daily life onto paper. I mean, that's one purpose that it served, but what it really, really did for me, any creativity that I did, regardless of writing or what it was, it gave me the ability to look at all of my thoughts, corral them, analyze them, and really understand what was going on and figure out a way to express them. And the act of actually expressing them, the act of writing out something or creating something, to see the end result before you even start, taught me so much about how I think, how to stop my thoughts and figure out why I'm thinking that way, and then how I want to express it. And in the process of understanding how I want to express it, what I'm really doing is understanding what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking that. So I think it taught me more about myself than anything I could have ever gone through. It wasn't just the ability to express myself and that relief, it was also this huge lesson in me.
Sharing my story was an incredible journey, even though I felt like I had blinders on.
Can everybody see me okay? Because I am vertically challenged, if you haven't noticed.
It was something that I would want to do again and again. I mean, I do it for work, and that's different because it's one-on-one. But when you got like 100 plus in the room, it gets a little nerve-wracking, you know. But I would so do it again. I would not hesitate to get out there and speak and let my story be heard in a positive way.
I was approached by a coalition member who stated that I would be a very good candidate for working as a peer specialist to help others with mental health issues. At first, I really thought they were joking. I mean, because I was like staring at them and I'm just like, why would you hire someone with mental health issues to work with someone with mental health issues? I couldn't get it.
When I went back to my seat, however, there was this one woman that was sitting directly behind me. And I had asked her if she was okay, you know, and she said, yes, your story was incredible. And she gave me a hug, which I was completely taken back by that. And I hugged her back because I knew that it touched her.
My name is Dese'Rae Stage. I'm a photographer, I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and I'm working on a series of portraits and stories of suicide attempt survivors called Live Through This. What I think Live Through This will give to other attempt survivors is hope, but also an honest perspective on what it looks like to live through a suicide attempt, what happens afterwards, where do you go, is there anybody else out there, and how are they feeling?
So I started interviewing people and set up a site and posting dozens of interviews, and the American Association of Suicidology took notice and said, we should have something like that. Would you mind setting one up for us? So about a year ago that launched, and it was the first of its kind, apparently in the world, by any suicide prevention or mental health organization. So that's pretty cool. It took obviously decades for something like that to come about, but now it's about. And hopefully the trend will just keep growing.
Someone asked me for like the 10,000th time why I'm doing this last August, and it clicked. I said, I'm doing this to find my community. And then I said, okay, well, I've got to put all of these people together. And so I started a peer support group basically on Facebook, and I connected all of the people who have been a part of the project who are on Facebook. And you know, anytime anything goes wrong for one of them or they're doing something right or whatever, they post on it and they talk to each other. And if it gets hard for one of them, there's always somebody there. It's amazing. I want the project to resonate with anybody who looks at it. And I think that it can. I think that because there are so many different types of people involved, that anyone looking at it will be able to find one story, even a single line of a story, that they'll be like, yes, I understand.
I think when I started doing this project, collecting interviews from anybody I could find, really, it was empowering to me, and the way I described it was, it felt like a relief. Because it was helping me. I needed to know that other people out there had been through this.
Going forward, I see the project, it could take any number of directions. It could continue to be this online resource, this almost database of stories of every different kind of person. And it could therefore be proof that this affects everybody, not just the gay kids or the bullied kids or the goth kids or whatever our ideas of a suicidal, the stereotype of a suicidal person are. So it can manifest itself in 100 different ways. And some of them I'm sure I'm not even thinking of, honestly, but I don't plan on stopping anytime soon, so wherever it takes me, I'm going.
In early March, a groundbreaking summit was held in San Francisco to examine ways to bring the attempt survivor voice to the planning table.
I think once they got to know me and once they saw what my intentions really were and realized what I had to say and what I had to do, I kind of was brought into a whole new world of people who are filled with passion and filled with hope and truly want to do something to change lives. The Massachusetts State Conference that I went to last year, if there's anything I could take away from that 2-day experience, it was the absolute incredible power of being shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of people who all shared the same intention of doing everything they can to prevent suicide. And it didn't matter if you were an attempt survivor, a loss survivor, a doctor, a therapist, or what angle you were coming from, everybody had the same intention. And I felt very welcome there. And even to go further, meeting with the AFSP and being involved in some of the walks locally in Massachusetts, I've been very, very well received.
I go to all the conferences and seminars because I want to be able to provide enough hope for people. I do not want people to feel the way that I felt. So I'm hoping that we could turn that around.
I think the field is changing as we are hearing more and more voices of those with lived experience. I think it's going to start opening doors in the field to those who've previously been fearful of involving suicide attempt survivors in their efforts and in suicide prevention. I think as we hear those voices, strong voices coming out from across the United States, that it will lend an opening of a door to the field, to involving suicide attempt survivors and helping us to design and implement not only suicide prevention programs, but programs to serve those who've been at heightened risk.
If we equip them with the right training clinicians, and if they work with attempt survivors regularly and hear the voice of attempt survivors, and so they learn that suicidal thoughts does not a suicidal person make, but there's something you can do about it, and if you collaborate with them, they'll tell you what's going to help them. So, to me, it is absolutely critical that clinicians begin to not only get training, but work with and hear the voice of attempt survivors. But for all those years, we've been treating them like bad children, and who should be seen and not heard, and maybe not even seen.
Next week, I will be interviewing several professionals in the mental health field, which is huge for me. I mean, these are the very people who seemed like they were the enemy in some ways. And now they're, because they're the ones locking us up, but now they're in some ways coming out on their own, saying, I have been here, I've been locked up, I've been through this, whatever, and also I'm on the other side of it so I can treat you with compassion and I know what it feels like. I think having stories like that could be a huge catalyst for change, just as much as any of the rest of them are, because the moment the professionals start talking about this openly, there are going to be more and more, and we're going to start seeing them try to make a change more than they have. You know, I feel like the fact that they'll have the numbers to cut through the bureaucratic red tape, things will change. I mean, we can only do so much, but once we all kind of gel, I think it's going to be a huge deal.
And I think if we can lift the silence, if we can lift the fears that exist in the mental health world, in the suicide prevention world, so many more of these people can come out and show us how common this really is, how widespread this problem is. And suddenly we can take so many more actions to help everyone. We're not going anywhere if we just sit in fear and silence.
You got to work on yourself inside too, in order for you to have a healthy and productive life.
So right now, I would like all of you to say to your neighbors, you matter, because you all matter to me. Thank you.
At its recent 2014 conference, the American Association of Suicidology announced a new lived experience division. Now, to some, that may appear to be a sudden quantum leap. What it really does is just finally bring us to the starting blocks. We need to now prepare for a marathon. A voice at the table is a call to action. It is a celebration of not just survival, but living fully. And above all else, a collective story of resilience and hope.
I've learned that we're out there, and that for some reason we're less afraid, and that we're gonna start changing some things.